Okay, RPG rules, RPG settings tutorial part 2. We're going to talk about damage types here. So this is when you're looking to make up your own RPG game. You're thinking big at the beginning. What type of damage do you want to have in there? You know, having a look here at Energy Bolt, one of Stargirl 3000's basic powers, it's of type energy. We've got a big drop list here of all the different types of damage it can do. I've probably gone a little bit overboard. I would say here, you know, I've got energy damage and radiation damage, for example. I've got toxic and acid burn. I'm not entirely sure what absolutely awesome game-related event is going to force the player to differentiate between these two. But it's, yeah, just stressing the system to the limit a bit here. So where do all these damage types come from? The answer is they come from the customenum.cs code file again. So that I talked about in the last tutorial in character stats lives in the bottom of the script folder. And that's the one you're invited to edit. The damage type enum is an enum a bit like the character stats one, with a few little differences in it, really. And it says in the comment here, they all have to be a power of 2. So if we look at the character stats or an unnumbered one, they go values 0, 1, 2, etc., just counting up from 0. Here we have specified this is 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. You can see the doubling every time, up until water at the end, which has got a value of 16384, 2 to the power 12 or whatever it is there. And the reason for this is we want to be able to combine these in a unique way. So this is what's called a bit field encode. We want to be able to add damage types together. Let me explain why. When I'm making an offensive power like Energy Bolt, I can say, right, I want this to do light damage, or sonic damage, or energy damage. It can only be one. You know, it can't be mixed damage type. If I select something like exothermic, it pops me back to fire. And we'll have a look at why that is. So exothermic is defined as anything that is fire or electric or energy or light or radiation. Exothermic literally meaning giving out heat. You know, these are all the attack types which are sort of positive energy, you know, will heat something up and melt it. Endothermic sucks in energy, cold, negative and water. They're the types that are going to cool something down and freeze it. Physical is, you know, where there's kind of like an object or something physical involved. Crushing, piercing, toxic, acid burn, sonic and water. Elemental are more kind of energy types and so on. So these are special composite types I've set up, and therefore defensive powers. Let's just find one of them. Let's have a look at telekinesis is probably a good example. Spin shield. Okay, that's got an empty entry there. So spin shield is a telekinetic, basically picking up lots of debris and spinning it around themselves, and it's only going to defend you against physical damage, where there's actually a physical object there. It's not going to stop light getting through, it's not going to stop radiation getting through, or psionic attacks getting through. So physical there means any attack that's either crushing, piercing, toxic acid, sonic or water will get blocked by this shield. Yeah, so that's a case where a composite thing makes sense when you're saying what you're defending against. When you're picking an attack you're using, you have to specify just one type, and it has to be a power of 2. Now, there are a couple of limitations on this. One should always be blunt trauma or crushing or whatever you want to call it. Crushing, physical, something like that. That's used for knockback damage. If you knock someone back with whatever type of attack and throw them against a wall, they take crushing damage of type 1. Once again, these are not actually referenced through the code. Crushing gets referenced once there. but it just says damage type 1 when in the knockback code. Similarly, healing should always be the last one, and you should always have an all type which includes everything but healing. I've sort of grouped them together here, with physical being all of these physical object type ones, elemental is all the energy ones, and paranormal is all the kind of magic-y ones, and together they're everything. Then you also have corporal, which is physical, elemental, and negative, but doesn't include psionic and magic. Exothermic, and I'm talking about sensory, is light and sonic. You might have a character who's vulnerable to sensory attacks because they have heightened senses, for example. Chemical is just toxic or acid burn, and so on. So you always want to have crushing as one, healing as a special one, and the reason for that is when you have a heal is just a negative damage attack, and you don't want a character who's paid for resistance powers or defensive powers to have their healing reduced. You may want to have a curse you can put on someone to reduce their healing, and then you do it as resistance to healing damage as a special thing, but healing is basically a special damage type that isn't affected by normal defenses. There. So, if you want to change this array, feel free to, but stick to those rules. So I'll just go through a quick example of how you might do this. Say we want to... let's just comment all of this out. And let's set something up for a simple fantasy game. We might have all weapons just do physical damage. Yeah. And then we have fire, cold, lightning, and poison. The only damage types you can set up spells as or attacks as. Out of here we might then go, we maybe want to say magic equals fire or cold or lightning. And what have we forgotten? We've forgotten to put healing in there. So we make healing, we could make that 32 at the end there. And put a comma at the end of each line. So that would then sort of configure our game to have these types available. If we then have a quick look over here at the energy bolt power again. Damage type doesn't contain a definition for all. That's right. We need to go all. And that would be physical or magic or poison. You know, all the types of damage that actually do damage. If we have a look now, it doesn't contain a definition for water. Okay, I'll just stick that. That's my fault. I'll make this go away by the time you get this. We need to have corporeal and water, do we? Water would actually fit into a fantasy game quite well. There we go. Errors, go away. Right, so now when we're picking a damage type, you can see we've got physical, fire, cold, lightning, poison, magic, healing, all, and corporal and water we have to shove in there. And if we try to pick magic, it'll take us to fire, which is the first type in that composite type. Yeah, so that's what that array is all about. I'll revert back to my Control-KU to uncomment my original setup. Why do we want damage types? It's sort of rock, paper, scissors. You know, there is this idea that you have fire damage and you'll come into a room full of ice demons who are all vulnerable to fire and it'll be great. Or you might come into a room full of fire demons and it kind of sucks because they only take half damage from your attacks because of the way they're set up. I think there are better ways to do rock, paper, scissors like that. However, what damage types definitely do is they give players bonuses to chase. You know, you may find if you've got, say, 4 magical types of damage, you're chasing resistances to them all the time in the game. And looking at your character sheet and going, wow, I've got 75% resistance to lightning now. I'm the man. Yeah, so the good in that way. Like I said, I've probably gone a little bit overboard with the number of different types I've set up here, but I was wanting to make a deliberately complex system that's going to stress RPG rules rather than just make a simple one with physical and magic and keep my fingers crossed, really. Yeah. Now, one last thing to have a look at with regards to damage types. Let's see. Is this going to return to normal? Atomic blasts, energy bolt. Should be energy, yeah. Right. In the RPG settings object, let's stay in energy bolt for a minute. The tint of this power is electric. If I make it energy, like the name suggests, it becomes yellow instead. If I make it fire, it becomes orange, or I can pick a custom colour from the colour wheel, and so on. This is configured, it was electric, wasn't it, in that custom enum. Again, we've got damage types, and then we have colour codes here, which is just a plain list. Now, they have the same names, crushing, piercing, toxic, fire, cold, etc., but they're not really related. These are just a group of names for some standard colours, and they are all set in the RPG settings object. If you have a look down the bottom here, you can see health, mana, crushing, piercing, everything that's in that list there. Healing, etc., custom. You know, I could put another one in here. What might stick in there as a different colour scheme? Orgone. Save that. And that will then appear in here in a few seconds. Go down the bottom. Yep, there's Orgone there, and which, as everyone knows, is blue. Pick a colour for it there. So the reason I had these standard colours in is twofold. I initially put them in because when I was making, say, a Fire Blast power set, I didn't want to have to be picking a colour off the colour wheel every time. Unity's colour wheel does support swatches. You know, you can have some colours down here. Say I think this shade of blue is really useful for using later. I just click there and it goes into my swatch. And then if I pick something else, I can go, yeah, I want that shade of blue I picked before, like that. But that's all stored per machine rather than being stored in a centralized location as a file in the project. So I put this in so that basically every firepower I could just go, yeah, select fire from a drop list, and with a little bit of editor code magic, it shows you the color next to it there. You know, if I go fire, oh yeah, that orange color, yeah, cool. Say, for example, when I was doing Earth Control, I made everything radiation coloured. Not because it's got anything to do with radiation, but it looks sandy. And it was a nice colour for Earth Control tints to have and for icons to have. Yeah, so I did it for ease of use. So you can just go fire, electric, yeah, that's the one. And also to establish a consistent visual language for the player. So that if you're playing this game I'm making and you see an enemy firing a pink bolt towards you from their head, you're pretty sure it's psionic in nature. You know, even if you haven't encountered this type of character before. What exactly you're going to do about that, I don't know, but it helps the player. You know, if you log on to a new character who you're leveling up and their icons are all pink, you just sort of, oh yeah, this feels psionic. I know where I am. oh, those cops are firing little silver bullets at me, they're probably piercing damage, and so on. So it sort of assists making the game readable to players, having this colour scheme that you stick to for everything. Yeah, so that's what to do with damage types. Quick recap. Set up your damage types as powers of 2, have crushing and healing where they are. You have to have one called all, and you can make as many composite types as you like. If you select a composite type for an attack, it'll just pick the first primitive type that it's made up, like physical becomes crush and elemental becomes fire. And yeah, and once again, these were, you know, there was a little error there with corporal and water, but these are not going to be hard-coded anywhere. You can change these names as much as you want. And that is how you set up your damage types in RPG rules.